Okay, so we are here with Mark and Dylan, the two co-founders of Mission for Ukraine. We're excited to have them as the speakers for our second winter webinar. What we'd like to do is just introduce them and have them share more about their experiences, how they became so involved in such great work, what their experience has been like in terms of the setup and in terms of, really taking social entrepreneurship to the next level and being an exemplar for our students. So we're very proud to be partnered with them. They are two tremendous young gentlemen, and we are humbled to be able to help them in such great work. Jarrett, would you like to say a couple words? You're on mute, Jarrett.
Yes, I would say we're very happy with our partnership. It's supporting a sovereign nation, democracy, and the lessons that go behind it. So we're just very proud and happy, and we want to see it evolve, emerge, and grow.
Great. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to invite Mark Kreynovich and Dillon Carroll to share a little bit more about their stories. So go ahead, gentlemen.
Wonderful. I'm going to pull up a little presentation that we put together. And you guys let me know if you're seeing this.
Yeah, we can.
All right. And is it full screen by any chance?
We see just your screen.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, hold on.
There we go.
Okay, here we go.
Perfect. All right, take it away.
Right? Yeah, that's full screen. Okay.
There's like a black bar.
Yeah, there's
though.
like half of it missing, right? What
There we
about
go.
now?
Wait.
There it is. There it is. Yeah.
Stop right there.
Amazing.
Okay, go.
Sorry. All right.
Okay, go.
Well, thank you all for the warm introduction. Taylor, that was very, very kind of you. And Jared, it's a pleasure to be invited and to work with you. My name is Mark. I'm originally from Kharkiv, Ukraine, which is where I was born and I spent my summers growing up. My parents immigrated to Baltimore when I was 6 months. I spent the majority of my life and my upbringing in Baltimore. And then I went to Cornell, where I met Dylan. We were first year roommates. Afterwards, I worked at Goldman Sachs in their investment banking division. I've always been really passionate about finance, startups, entrepreneurship. And that led me from there to a company called Quip, which you may have seen some toothbrush advertisements for them. And that really gave me an operational hands-on, I guess, background to working in situations that were much less structured and had no processes that, were tried and tested and new ones had to be developed. So I think that to my surprise, quite well, prepared me for this. And yeah, I think that's all I'll add prior to sort of jumping in on how we wind up calling you from Warsaw for now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dylan. I grew up in Ridgewood, New Jersey, so not too far away from all of you. And that's why I was able to go and see Jarrett and Taylor last week. As Mark said, we met as roommates at Cornell University our first year and instantly became best friends. Even found out that we had the same birthday, which becomes relevant to the Ukraine war, which Mark will go into in a moment. But after Cornell, I worked at Teach for America as a history teacher in the Newark, New Jersey school district, where I was teaching AP World History. And following that, I worked as a technical consultant at a company in Washington, D.C. Called Qualtrics. And similarly, like Mark, always been interested in business and entrepreneurship and learning about things. And social entrepreneurship was not necessarily something that I knew much about or was considering after college. And the last 2 years has been an incredible journey in learning about that and developing our own organization to help people.
Yeah, so it was February 23rd, I guess, in the States of New York. I was getting ready for a long night, and the war had started in Kharkiv, 7 hours later. That sort of threw me out of commission for the next 3 days. I went through a lot of fear that I wouldn't see my grandfather again, who was still living there. I worried a lot for my family and friends, for those of my parents, and I felt quite restless sitting at home. I reached out to Dylan. He felt the same way, and he eventually came by and suggested, "Hey, why don't we go do something and help?" Which was certainly a little more satisfying, let's say, than sitting at home. And so we left for a week to volunteer, and it sort of snowballed, which is in essence, it became a responsibility and also our deep reward in doing this. From the very beginning, local expertise, fluency, and sort of just regional knowledge really assisted us in being able to curate the most high impact projects. From the very start, the focus was direct and on the ground. We were, running through pharmacies and warehouse centers, and working on a quick feedback loop throughout that time. And really, our focus and frustration, I think, looking back now, is that we sort of lived on this spectrum of either donating money and like resharing things on Instagram, or leaving your life and like joining a nonprofit full time. And in our post-college situation, neither one of those were super satisfying. One left us underwhelmed, right, and the other was at least it seemed quite extraordinarily far from everything that we've been imbued with from school, regarding career. I don't know if Dylan, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think Mark, hit the key right there. It was something for us that grew and grew, and that we're lucky to be a part of, and that we're lucky to have been able to build upon. This wasn't something that was necessarily planned for. Originally, we were intending to go over for a week to help out, because we just felt so dissatisfied with doing the same old posting on our social medias from our apartments in the United States. And it's been an incredible journey over the last, what has now been almost 2 years of doing this work in Ukraine. If Mark, if you'll transition to the next slide, this gives you a little bit of an overarching picture at some of the things that we've been able to accomplish over the last 2 years. But it all, as Mark said, has focused, in our ability to have accomplished these things has centered around our ability to look at a more close knit and local perspective when it comes to working in Ukraine and helping people. We're two friends, two individuals. We're not some large, huge organization with tens of millions of dollars already in our budget to go and help people. This started from scratch and from crowdfunding in particular. And what we knew from the get-go is that we needed to be able to help in a very specific way that was tailored to what we were actually able to handle. And so over the last 2 years, we've been able to provide chronic care medication to thousands of patients, provide evacuations, especially early on in the conflict in occupied areas. And we've accumulated over 2,000 supporters from around the world. Jarrett and Taylor learned about our cause and everything that we were doing about a month and a half, 2 months in to our work, which is about in April of 2022. And very quickly, they heard about our story and what we were doing and wanted to become a partner of ours to ensure that we could continue doing our work. They are one of over 10 partners that we've made, both locally in Ukraine, that help us carry out our operational logistics on the ground, as well as organizations based in the United States and elsewhere that help us in a variety of different aspects with our work. We've fundraised over $750,000 and delivered most of that already to different projects, which we'll go into and touch on in a moment. And we've been very fortunate to have been noticed and spoken about and highlighted in various news publications, which, especially early on, helped us as we were focusing in on growing our efforts and making sure that we could continue to make an impact in Ukraine as we grew our organization and thought more about how exactly we could make the most direct impact.
And so of course it didn't start out this way. Dylan was, we were looking at some photos to put into the slideshow, and we came across some from a very long time ago. You know, this one on the right was me FaceTiming my grandfather as a rocket actually detonated in his like backyard where he was staying outside of the city. And you can see my sort of, shocked face right there. And his relatively acclimated demeanor. And seeing photos from my aunt, who was saying that, especially as for teachers, like she started her career at this school. She's a teacher. She's actually a nationally acclaimed teacher as well. And the place that she spent her very first years looks like this now. And to see that in my family group chat was quite, it certainly reinforced why we're here, why we connect to this, and why we can do so much for these people closely to them. Yeah, I mean, this started, like Dylan said, as just a crowdfunding campaign. It's really fortunate, and I think a testament to how much work so many people have put in that we are now here. But it's funny to look back and see and think back to how much we were worried about like color arrangements on something that we couldn't really even customize. And those first few weeks really, we spent the majority of our time in Poland and Vienna, sort of shuttling back and forth with a variety of chronic care medications, insulin, other pharmaceuticals, epileptics, all kinds of things that suddenly the pharmaceutical supply chain in Ukraine could no longer provide. That was still in Europe, and it was not always easy. We discovered how also, pharmacies deal with quantity issues, inventory issues. I mean, I've been fortunate, I guess, to really not run into that myself. But when you need X number of some kind of drug, right, you end up hitting like 12 pharmacies in a day. So this was us here with two folks that we had met, pharmacists, that were really helpful to us. And this girl, Sophia, who lives in Vienna, who's actually the sister of my ex-roommate's coworker. Crazy story, but she spoke German and English and was just delightful and hugely helpful. And yeah, I mean, we've really been so lucky to create relationships with doctors, with entire hospital units. And so, it started from like reorganizing over-the-counter medicine in a parking lot right before the border, has developed into, medical devices that are working on dozens of patients per day, and really delivering much more impactful impact yet.
We also focused a lot on helping various people and populations throughout Ukraine from the early part of the war throughout the last 2 years. In particular, especially in those first 3 months, we were able to help fund the evacuations of over 1,000 people in occupied areas in different regions of Ukraine. We were able to purchase the fuel and fund the purchase of a vehicle that would be evacuating these people from these areas. And that was an extraordinarily difficult, complex, as you can imagine, affair to figure out, both finding the drivers and making sure, ensuring that people would be safe and whatnot. But it was an incredibly rewarding experience as well. We also focused on providing food and different hygiene staples to different communities, especially in hard-hit regions near the front lines throughout the war. You can see on the left-hand side and the lower right-hand side the distribution of some of those goods to different people. And we even focused early on providing housing to refugees and internally displaced people who had to leave their homes or their apartments in various cities. As you can see, Mark here holding a little girl, and our friend Phil, who we made also holding another little kiddo as we were helping them move into their apartment. And I think purchasing groceries for Easter, like a big Easter dinner. And so, focusing on these areas as well of helping people directly, getting to meet them and know them has been an incredibly rewarding part of our work. We also focus on helping repair infrastructure, which has been something that we've particularly focused on in Kharkiv, where Mark was born, the nation's second largest city, located in the far east, about 40 kilometers from the border with Russia. And as you can see in these pictures that we took, the devastation is immense. A lot of these people's apartments are now boarded, their windows are boarded with plywood or with kind of like PVC film, which both blocks out light and does not provide enough insulation for suitable living conditions. However, people don't have necessarily anywhere to go. And so they're living in these apartments regardless. And so our efforts have focused on helping different individuals and families not only repair their windows, but also install insulation and make their living situation inherently more livable. We've also focused on setting up points of warmth, especially last year in different regions that needed them. These points of warmth had cots, they had heating stations, charging stations for people's devices, food, and provided a sense of security during a really difficult time, as the winter is when the Russian army has increasingly targeted different regions throughout Ukraine and population centers all throughout. And then Mark, I think you're doing this one.
All right. So, that was oh, Dylan, can you mute yourself? Nice. All right. Sorry for the echo there. As Dill mentioned, we primarily worked in these three directions, sort of medical, people, and shelter. There were some highlights throughout these as well that I think are worth sharing. At the top right, you'll see a photo of a mobile medical hospital. This is a state-of-the-art technology that has 2 operating rooms. It's currently about 10 kilometers from Zero Line, which is the most forward part of the front. It is now a critical medical point that works as an intermediary before the regional hospital. We were able to deliver this last Thanksgiving, which was really a very great way to celebrate that holiday. I certainly know both Dill and I feel incredibly grateful for the people that are allowing us to live more or less safely in Kiev, that are unfortunately using this, and the civilians that live there as well. Dill also discussed the Youth Activity Center, which is that sort of can I go back on this? No, I cannot. Oh, okay. This building right here. We were basically able to redo all of this. As you can see, the interior now looks like an Arc Digest magazine went through this. But it is now this is a village of 2,500 people. There are 60 kids that come to the center every day, or 6 days a week, sorry. And they run a variety of courses in English, fitness, art. This is a really fantastic place for parents to gather. It's sort of the only functioning social point now in their village. And we've really developed relationships with these families. They know us. Some of them have even started small entrepreneurial activities. I was mentioning to Jared and Taylor recently that a mother had started cutting hair there in like another part of this area, which is source of livelihood for her, because regardless of anything, people still need haircuts. And these are just some more photos from the shelters and residential areas that we've built. This lady right here in the hat, this is actually her kitchen. You can see there's a clock here, but all of the numbers now are all over the place. And this is quite north in the city. So, our focus has been on, there's a lot of damage in residential sites, but some people are still living there for a variety of reasons. Either they don't have kids that will take them in, either they can't afford it, they feel like they don't know how to sort of function and operate through the systems that you need to, for a variety of reasons, language, other factors, and so they're going to live there one way or the other. The way that we see it is, these people are either going to be living there freezing to death, or they're going to at least be able to maintain some kind of warmth, heat, etc. So our focus has been on repairing kitchens, bedroom areas, and sort of these functional places for as many people as we can. And so as we look forward, sort of looking at what the current situation in Ukraine is, there was a slight recovery, economic recovery in sort of mid-2022, but that has unfortunately long since passed. And there are about 35 million people still in the country. Half of them are listed as either severe, extreme, or catastrophic levels of aid. And over these last 2 years, we know these people, and we also know how to help them. And so we feel, again, this sense of responsibility that we cannot sit idly by. We have to act now. The war, continues to impact people's lives severely. Even in Kiev, it's sort of always eye-opening to us to return to the US because, we're sort of now as well privy to the media cycle. But, I guess 3 weeks ago I was sitting in Kiev and I thought that like one of the bricks would just like shake out of the building that I was in. So it's still happening. And in fact, it's actually much more difficult on a daily life level because, now suddenly your kids, it's just like COVID, right? And like sending your kids back to school and like that fiasco, like it's that, but there is no solution because there's still a war going on. So people are getting antsy, edgy, the economy is continuing to struggle. Schooling is struggling because there are most of the education facilities in many villages have been destroyed. It still presents a danger. So for a variety of reasons, it's our mission is maybe more important than ever actually. And the way that we're doing this has also sort of reflected on what we have seen in working on the ground amidst multinational organizations that you are familiar with, a la UN, Save the Children, UNICEF, and others. These are fantastic large organizations that have resources, means, but a recent report from 2022 indicated that less than 1% of all contributions were transferred to local NGOs. And there are a lot of reasons for this, but some of them are the fact that these are really time-consuming processes, and one-off funding sort of complicates. It's great to rebuild a youth activity center in Sitklane where 60 people a day go, but what's the point of investing all of that for it to run for a month if you have little to no view as to how you're going to cover the pay or the utilities or for whatever for months 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? And so this sort of impedes quick action. And so the way that we've tried to approach the situation was, well, how can we identify the most enthusiastic people with the right fit skill set for this project that they're already working on? How can we directly empower them and their civil society that's sort of best equipped to handle the needs that themselves and their neighbors are going through? And how can we work and source that locally? And then go further and work to develop an authentic relationship between the donors and the beneficiaries of their generosity. So sort of trying to leverage tech tools that we use in other parts of our life, in the interest of charitable giving, and not just charitable giving, but really caring about other people, and making that bond.
And so, as in all entrepreneurial journeys, we've seen a lot of different changes and evolutions in what we've done and how we have organized our work and our focus. And as Mark and I move into the future, we know that we want to continue helping these communities, as Mark was saying rightly, that we feel a deeper sense of responsibility to help, not just build an activity center, but to make sure that that activity center continues to serve the community and can grow in capacity. And so as we look at all of the projects that we have done over the last 2 years, Mark and I see our mission in twofold. It is to help in saving lives and to help empower Ukrainian communities. And what we envision for ourselves as an organization continuing to help in Ukraine, both during this crisis and afterwards, is to be a pillar that continues to help Ukraine's healthcare system continue to save lives, and also to help these communities and give them the tools to rebuild themselves into stronger ones. And so as you can see on the next slide, the way in which we envision doing this is by focusing on large projects per quarter, the empowering community side of our work, that are impactful, that are long-term, and that can be sustained. These are things like the Youth Activity Center that we've already developed in Kharkiv, as well as some other projects that Mark will touch on in a moment. And on the Saving Lives side, we've spoken with our partners and the people with whom we've worked with throughout Ukraine, and they told us that the single most life-saving project we have been able to complete is this mobile hospital unit, which comes equipped with 2 surgical rooms, a pharmacy, x-ray, laboratory, and generators, and a team that is staffed to service the people that can be seen on the hospital itself. And so our focus is now more streamlined on how do we make sure that these projects and initiatives can be funded and continue to help people in Ukraine as the war progresses and develops. And so, oh, Mark, sorry.
You still gotta mute yourself now. Okay, do you guys hear me now? Wonderful. So great. So to sort of be a little more illustrative about these quarterly projects, and sort of to wrap up the M4U side of this conversation as well, and sort of bring it to what does this mean for TEEEM and for teachers and for your students, most importantly, is what we're doing in 2024 and 2025. So as previously mentioned, we've broken this up into 3 primary categories of health, sort of livelihoods, personal, and infrastructure. The health situation in Ukraine is frankly abysmal. It wasn't so phenomenal prior to the war, but those problems have been hugely exacerbated. So we've discussed the role that the mobile hospital is playing already, and what they will be doing in the future as well post-war is sort of helping to bridge that rural health accessibility gap that exists in the United States again, but that exists even more immensely here. And also working with Akhmedit, which is the largest children's hospital pediatric center in Ukraine, in Kiev, where Secretary Anthony Blinken went to help them with a pool renovation that would allow kids to learn how to live with prosthetics, how to work with them, wear them, function with them in a more in a less painful way. Similarly, we're continuing to work with demining projects for many reasons. This poses a tremendous problem, but in particular, as one example, it creates a livelihood issue. One of the families that we're rebuilding a home for, Sergei and Sveta, they are farmers, and they had a pretty, I would say, comfortable upper middle class life, but their farms are now completely mined. Their fields are mined, and so the only thing that they have had as a source of income for the last 30, 40 years it is now a completely unusable asset. And there is no other work for them because they live in the village, right? So suddenly they are in destitute poverty. Their entire house has been destroyed during the occupation. They actually right now live in the garage as we're rebuilding, which should be completed by spring. So that is just one element of why demining is so important to civilian life. And then finally, in rebuilding, again, the focus is on solving some of these youth socialization education gaps, where kids just don't have places to be intellectually stimulated in a safe, secure area, with opportunities to socialize and just be kids. And then finally, with Sitkunli and other villages around, again, these are sort of like with anything else, if it's like maybe a bad example, but like apocalypse horror movies, right? Like you always want to be in the city because that's where all the people are, that's where all the resources are. So a lot of these villages, they're not only, it's out of sight, out of mind, but people are still living there. So, our focus has been on doing our best to accommodate the needs of families that have, not only lived through the suffering of the occupation and the tremendous, I cannot even imagine, fear and overwhelming challenge that came with that, to now, continuing to live in a place of true economic decay, and an uncertain military situation. So that's sort of how we see our role, is lightening these loads up as best as we can. All right. So I'll start off here, and Dylan, whenever you want to hop in, we laid out our thoughts and reflections on two slides for again, sort of what this means for TEEEM, what we have gleaned from our experiences, and how we think now, looking back, this could be imbued in a really meaningful way to students. I guess I can begin by saying that social entrepreneurship as a concept was not something, again, really familiar to me. I probably wouldn't have even been able to define it. I wouldn't be sure if it means a business or a nonprofit or what, and what does that Venn diagram look like anyway. But ultimately, right, as defined, I think here, social entrepreneurs pursue innovative solutions to social problems to create positive change in society. So, I think most importantly, they are mission driven and generating social value, but also they're financially sustainable. So, this is the difference between something like crowdfunding versus planning 6, 12, 18-month timelines ahead, so that the projects that you invest in are actually making a durable and time standing impact. I'll just start from the bottom of this sort of pyramid here. I think for both of us, it was so important to connect with the situation. I mean, like I said, I was sort of out of commission of work, and Dylan was like, "Hey, let's do this crazy thing." And I believe for both of us, the reason that this was, even possible was because we so authentically connected with this cause. And so what I would suggest is, including the team project associated with the school, but even outside for themselves, like really, I think it would be wonderful to encourage students to explore, like, what is their social cause North Star? If there is one thing that they could really commit themselves to, on like a physicist, author, whatever, on a tombstone plaque, if it wasn't philanthropist or humanitarian or whatever, like, what would it actually say, right? Would it be something in the health space, in the animal health space, in social wellness, and there are literally hundreds of things. And I think on a now level regarding Ukraine, but also other issues, I think that equipping students with materials and the networks to discover and learn in new ways, I think as well, focusing on speaker panels, just like this one, for instance. I don't know how much I had of this, and this is something that TEEEM does a really great job of getting us into schools in front of students to talk about this. But it's connecting with professors. I think we didn't quite realize how open people are to helping you and to teaching you about what they care about and what they know about. If you're just kind and curious yourself. And to that end, I think knowledge creates empathy. When the closer you are to another human being, like, the closer you're going to feel that. They're sort of it's a simple formula. So, whether that be taking unique approaches to understanding what's going on in the country, like Twitter and Reddit, for instance, which is maybe a bit more of a complex place to navigate for students, but nonetheless important to sort of build that skill set where you can directly interact with frontline journalists, and sort of get out of the simple breaking news headlines or front page news and more into sort of investigative journalism kind of work. And that also stretches to YouTube as well. I think that, again, that's sort of integrating the digital into how we not just understand nonprofits and NGOs, but how we see life way over there. I think that's what it really comes down to. And I think bridging that divide is what sort of creates, I think, like, I don't know, common sense and compassionate perspectives.
Yeah, and I'll add on to a little bit more of what Mark said, especially as we, transitioning in this staircase, as Mark has set up this slide from smart and heart to preach and practice and the real world. When it comes to encouraging students to explore their North Star, in particular, it's about finding ways in which students can personally invest their skill sets, their knowledge, and their own gifts into serving a cause that they are, working towards. Because each person that's going to be coming to this, each student coming to this, is going to have, one's going to be a musician, one's going to be very good at using things like Canva and making slides. Someone's going to be, great at public speaking, and it's kind of always that person that when they get into a room, every single person is looking at them. And so, obviously you want people to inherently like tune into those things that they naturally are inclined towards and applying them towards the cause that they're trying to benefit and that they're trying to help. And that helps you get into this idea of, preaching and practicing, because then their genuine love and interest and connection in the things that they already have are applied to the social cause that they're trying to benefit. And so Mark had written this, it's serving others as a lifestyle. That's kind of like what it becomes, because it's taking the things that are already a part of who you are and what you like to do, and now you're putting it towards a greater purpose, and a greater cause. And on the idea of fostering, genuine relationships, in particular in this relentless kind of perspective of asking, of not being fearful of asking for help or reaching out for others. When you're working in social entrepreneurship, everything you're doing is on the behalf of someone else in need that otherwise, doesn't without you wouldn't necessarily be able to live the way or live the life that you so fortunately do get to live. And so there's a great responsibility in that. And it's a perspective that when you adopt, it kind of feeds into itself. It's reinforcing, because once you ask and you find, as Mark was saying previously, that people will help you, it kind of makes you feel like, oh, well, if that person can help, then I can go to this. And oh, if that works, then I can go do this. And the ideas and the innovativeness that come into, different projects and different initiatives to help these different causes, they start to kind of compound on one another. First, it's a bake sale. First, it's selling ribbons. But then it becomes, doing a virtual and in-person event. And then it's, or like, making, like doing something specifically with, like a turkey trot, or like getting the entire town involved, or reaching out to the mayor or your congressman, and doing things that are a little bit out of the box that a high school student can actually, like work with one another to accomplish. And I'm just looking at our time because we wanted to allocate 15 minutes to Q&A. Mark, you want to jump to the next slide?
Yeah.
Unless you have anything to
add. No, I'll leave it in. Well, sure. Actually, let's briefly. I think, if I can ask, I think there's also, a well-structured and understandable system for the startup and for-profit world. I imagine that there are probably even, sort of like highly marketed, publicized startup classes and like electives for juniors and seniors, which is phenomenal. However, I also think that we're sort of missing how exciting this part of that can be, because you actually get to affect real change and make a difference in people's lives, and it doesn't have to, you don't have to build the next UN to do that. It's really amazing. So I think just reminding high schoolers that they are old enough to help others, and more than that, they can do it. And we will sort of talk on, I guess, and briefly, and we can talk about this Q&A, but sort of some of the tools that we think are maybe useful for students to become acquainted with, and either social media management, presentation development, pitching, sort of the different fundraising styles. But these are a little bit more tactical, and we can discuss that if it's of interest. And I'll wrap this up finally, I guess, with a few examples of, how you can, Dylan sort of mentioned this hierarchy of bake sale to Live Aid concert with tens of thousands of people. But for us, it did work like that actually. We started with TEEEM with a project sponsorship grant donation that was instrumental in our medical and residential early work. In fact, Jared actually did the incredible honor of visiting us in Krakow, and this is a photo of the three of us with some boxes of gauze and scissors and pharmaceutical equipment and other stuff in the back that we were driving the next day. And we've worked with Mount Olive High School on fundraising with the ribbon sales, which has been an incredible project, and we were so fortunate to be able to visit them and even bring them some patches. But all of these people have been instrumental in connecting and sharing our message in their communities. And I think the pinnacle of our closeness so far, and we've got a lot of ways still to push forward, but we've also set up a virtual student exchange with a private high school in Kharkiv called the Boyko School and Mount Olive. And so it's a group of juniors, seniors, maybe a couple sophomores, one or two, from both schools that we focus both on sort of discussing the elephant in the room, but the idea was also to talk about the fact that we play chess and enjoy traveling and listen to the same music. And in this case, Ukraine is really not so far away. So it's easier, with other more distant crises, it can be more difficult. But there's nothing that these kinds of everyday human interactions cannot do to overcome, to show us that we sort of all lead the same lives, and it's really extraordinary what everyday people can do. And older high school students especially, I feel like I don't know, they're old enough. Some people are doing really amazing things as seniors in high school, right? I mean, they're going to phenomenal schools the next year. So I think it's really underslept on how much, not just everywhere abroad, but even in their own hometown, how much of a difference they could make if they just added that, substituted whatever that 5 to 7 hour block a week thing that they do is in their schedule, whether that be something productive or something unproductive, and really woke up and tried to help people every day. That's that, Dylan.
Nope, that's all. Thank you guys all for listening to us. And we are happy to take any of your questions, have a discussion about any of the points that we brought up. So fire away. Mark and I are all yours, and happy to help and provide insight in whatever way we can.
I always have 1,000 questions, so I'm gonna let other people ask them first. So do we have any questions for Mark and Dylan about anything related to their experiences, their expertise, their relations to TEEEM?
I don't really have a question. I just want to say thank you so much. This was really awesome.
Thanks for joining, Carla.
I was the same thing. Amazing presentation. What you're doing is incredible. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Great stuff.
So I have a question. Mark and Dylan, thank you so much for the presentation. I love the slide with the scaffolded, ways to really have kids develop a passion and then take that to the next level. But I think from a practical standpoint, as a team advisor, and I think a lot of us are feeling this way, the small things are wonderful, but how do we get kids to think bigger? And if you could just elaborate on how to really encourage kids to feel that empowerment, to know that they can put something together that's really gonna blow it out of the water. The small stuff's wonderful, but I want to encourage my students to be more risk takers, I guess I'm trying to say. How would you encourage that?
It's a great question. I think that's the crux of, what all of your roles are in not only being mentors and, you're all teachers at the schools that you work at, but, helping to inspire this within your students. I think in large part, it comes from a sense and understanding of the little things that we can take for granted in our life. As adults, Mark and I are young adults, we've all kind of been able to get outside of the school system and see life and see the ups and downs that, just inherently come from living life, working a job, losing friends, losing relatives, moving to different places, things that you inherently, see from time and maturity that as a student, if you're 14, 15, 16 years old, you don't necessarily can relate to. And so the idea of like not having, a window in your home or having, something like that might seem just very foreign and different. But if it can be reinforced and kind of really, I think, made to like imagine like what that actually would be like if it's wintertime, for example, sitting in a classroom when you're meeting with your students and like having the windows open like the entire time and like feeling how cold that classroom gets. And by like the end of whatever the meeting time is, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, everyone's kind of like looking over at their jackets that are hanging up on the wall, like wishing that they had them on. But, they're still having to go through the meeting or the class or whatever it may be to start and, kind of feel the impact of something that you otherwise might take for granted. And I think, too, one of the projects, the project that in particular I really am proud of is the personal connection we made between students, between similar age people, because I think that creates a sense of empathy that is very vital to getting kids to have this buy-in of like you're saying, to almost take on this risk taking. Like we can like shoot high, shoot for the moon in order to like make something happen. Because when you're able to understand that someone who's 5,000 miles away is more like you than different, you start to have people think about, okay, how can we make sure that Sasha and her family are able to, have a really great Christmas, or, Alex and his mom are able to, go to the groceries for a month this week, or a month in general. But that's kind of the idea, at least that I have in my mind, and Mark can add on to it, of how to start to imbue this sense of let's get to it, and we can do whatever we set our minds to.
I think going along with that too, Dylan, is this idea that like the help is so great and sometimes it's so big that the students like lose what the connection is. So in addition to meeting like the students and forming these connections through empathy, I think taking the big and like taking the abstract and making it very concrete. And like we spoke about how when the students that were supporting and continue to support Mission for Ukraine, it was really big picture things. And now it's like, we are going to focus on helping with a mobile medical unit, and you make it very, very tangible. I think the more that the goal is very specific, kind of helps kids get the wheels churning for, okay, this is the goal. It kind of takes the big ideas and makes them a little bit smaller. So it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition between like big ideas but really specific goals, is what we have started to find, which is why I'm really excited to see how we can have our students help moving forward. And as TEEM progresses, like we're trying to make the projects really attainable and specific for these students so that they have a really concrete understanding of where their efforts are going to, because then I think the buy-in is even further. Because if we want to help people in Ukraine, we have to help fund a mobile medical unit, and it's going to reach this number of people, and we try to quantify as much as we can. And I think continuing to emphasize that for our students, Ted, is really critical.
Mark, Dillon, I think also I just want to, I think when I look at what you do, I come away with the feeling of it's not an either. I can have a lofty goal or a specific goal, but I can have a lofty goal and a specific goal. It's not either or.
Exactly right, Jarrett.
And that's what we want students to come away with, because it's not it's a false binary, you know. And I think anyway. And also, you can be both humanitarian and innovative, and that's what you two both are. And you have, you know, you I think we as an organization team like Mission for Ukraine, we want to be, you know, driven by ideals but led by innovation. And you do that, and you're an example for us. So we appreciate that, and the cause is, again, you know, magnificent. So we're just very happy to be aligned.
Thank you, Jarrett. Yeah, I definitely think it's I don't know what it is. You know, I think like inherently, even the sort of linguistics behind it of profit, non-profit, or for profit, right? It's like in etymology, it's already sort of bifurcating this. They are somehow completely separate. And we can go into sort of the Calvinist and otherwise history of why this is in America. But you know, beyond that, it sort of removes the it makes it seem as though this is not a practical choice, although it actually is an incredibly practical choice. That's maybe astonishingly, you know, easy and purposeful, and that we owe it to ourselves to really try it out. That's right, because it's not, you know, do nothing or drop your whole life and, you know, move across the world. Although in our case, it sort of had to be that because there was nothing, you know, we sort of had to come to this conclusion through you know, testing our chipping our teeth.
But you know, just to say that 15 months ago, you spoke to over 100 students, or about 100 students at Ramapo College, and some of those students will be forever changed in a positive way because of your keynote speech. And you know, on behalf of them, you know, I'm sure they're going to want to thank you 10, 20 years from now. So I'll thank you for them now. So
That's very nice. That'll be a crazy day.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Mark and Dillon?
What was the slide with the boot that you showed, like the boots that were that for the mines? How do they work?
The spider boots.
Yes.
Yeah, here, let me see if I can go back to sharing this. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
This right here, right? I'm not on mute, am I? You hear me, right?
No, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay, great. Just got a little quiet and didn't see you guys. Yeah, so they're designed to lift the wearer above the ground. And so for, you know, sort of low gauge, low munition mines that are sort of more vehicle oriented, you know, a trained minesweeper could use this to sort of create that separation and increase safety. For instance, Sergey, who will not be doing this on his own, of course, but you know, who will have to have the DSNS, the demining sort of state system, come to his farm to do this.
That's really interesting. Awesome. And do we have any other final questions, Ted, Bianca, Michelle?
I do have a question, and it's okay. I don't know. People can feel free to hop off if
Of
they
course.
want, but
Go for
I
it.
guess I'm wondering, especially like you kind of talked about this a little bit already, but I guess I'm just thinking about like the students who I work with who are in a bit of a bubble. They're also very young, and I hear what you're saying about, you know, doing kind of simulate. I guess it's like trying to build, I guess, how is it that we can build time for students to be able to figure out what it is that they actually do care about, right? Because to your point, right, you had a direct connection to this specific cause, even though we know it's happening, it helps to have like something that's really calling you towards it, which is like something I'm trying to talk to our students about. But it's like, how is it that I'm just trying to think about for us, like they're high schoolers, they're young, they don't have a ton of lived experience. And so how it is you guide them to being able to identify what their North Star is. And then also how you can figure out who are the kids who are able to prioritize that on top of it all, right? There are all these other competing priorities. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure that might be a bigger question, but it's just something that's been on my mind. Because I have kids who'll come in with lots of different ideas, and then some keep going, or some need more help, or some just fall off.
Yeah, totally. I think the point about keeping attention and interest is something that we deal with as well. And it's also good to keep in mind that, yeah, there simply is less lived experience. I think, in my case, I feel fortunate that I was exposed to a lot of different subjects, themes, topics, events, experiences, generally speaking. Of course, not everything. And sometimes hopefully something clicks and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you were just called to things. I think, frankly, in the given situation, I think that's what it was for me. It would be it would be untruthful to say that I had considered doing something similar to this in the dozens of other humanitarian catastrophes that I have lived through. So I think it's important to be fair about that as well. And not everyone is like moved by this, which is fine too. I think they're all different kinds of people. I think it's about identifying those who seem to care a lot about things and showing them that they can do more than just care and read about and talk about it over lunch and debate it with their friends, but they can actually, be the change they wish to see in the world, if you will. And sort of, perhaps this is more of a question as well of like, being proactive and pushing yourself. I think that creating a sense of responsibility for another person is probably the most effective way that you can do this. I remember weeks of sleepless nights, and someone called and asked me if I could show up in Vienna, or in Krakow from Vienna, which was like a 4 or 5 hour trip, to help them go through an interview so that they could, come to the States to be with their family. And I was just worried that if they couldn't do that interview correctly in English, then they may not be able to see their family. So just like went, and the adrenaline of that, carried me through the hour and a half of sleep and the 5 or 6 hour drive. It's obviously difficult to do that, and I think it's also like it's emotionally onerous to do that many times when you're 16, 17. So also worth to keep in mind. But I think that there are things in all of our communities, even in school, that are more appropriate, that still deliver that same sense of like, oh, I got to do my homework, or I got this group project thing, and like there are 4 of us, and I haven't honestly even texted anyone. And but ideally, of course, not punitively, but really this should be a it should feel like a rabbit hole in Wikipedia. Like it should click that like that, because you're so enthused, you're so moved to figure out a way to help X group, whether it's in your school building, whether it's the staff at your school building, the students, whether it's like the park that borders your school building. It doesn't frankly matter. What matters is, I think, being conscientious about the fact that even at 16, 17, 18, I think even for some, right, as seniors, maybe, you can do a lot and even in pretty short time periods, without a reminder, without like a Thanksgiving 5K, without a reason, just because you're, you know, a human, and like that's what humans should do, is help people.
Thank you.
I don't yeah.
I'll add one thing. I know we're over time. I think in addition to what Mark said, thinking about each of these students truly, you know, they're all seated, they're all working towards, you know, this whatever cause that they're all working towards with TEEM. Look, having each of them just kind of go around just saying like, what is the thing that fires you up? Like not school, whatever. Like, is it Fortnite? Is it singing? Is it field hockey? Is it drawing, painting, whatever it may be? And having them then think about, well, how can you do whatever it is you just love to do, that I don't have to incentivize you, I don't have to give you a cookie, I don't have to give you a piece of candy, I don't have to give you extra credit. Like, you're going to go and do this by yourself, whether or not I tell you to or not. And what are the ways that you can, you know, take that and put it towards benefiting this thing that we're all here seated today, like trying to help. I was actually with my little cousins in Florida a couple of weeks ago, and they're 12 and or 13. They play Fortnite, and they're like different skins you can apply to your characters. And I didn't know this, but you can create your own, and you can also like sell items and things. And they like were talking about how like, oh, like, you know, you can like make a skin, sell something, and it's just like, well, what if you did that and you were like raising money for like whatever cause you were like caring about? Or if you're an artist and a musician, maybe you hold like a small concert and you invite people to come, and it's a $5 entrance fee, and like people from your school like come to listen to, you know, you singing songs, or it's a karaoke event that like you host because you're, you know, a singer in an a cappella group. Taking those things, and then if you have 8 individuals that are in this team group and each of them are kind of, you know, saying, hey, I'm really good at this, can like 2 or 3 of you like help me like make sure this gets together, and then we can launch this in a couple of weeks to help this cause, then you're basically, you know, then they're inherently going to start thinking, well, I already love to do this, like let's go big or go home. Like, we can do as much as we possibly can together. And I think that tapping into that North Star of, you know, not only, you know, like what causes do they care about, but also just like them themselves, like what do they love, like what do they really care about? And because there are ways in which you can apply it. There were people that we've met throughout our experiences that have, our friend Phil, who's a TikToker and YouTuber, you know, he loves to film and, you know, share stories, and he was able to help capture our moments and, you know, share things with our wider audience. Or there's this gentleman who plays piano and goes to different areas around the world in conflict zones and uses his following to, you know, play pieces and also provide comfort to people that are going through terrible situations. You know, these are real world scenarios of people doing, you know, things of traveling around the world and whatnot, but, you know, taking the essence of what it is that these people are using their unique and personal loves, interests, skill sets, and gifts, and applying them to something bigger than themselves. That's the essence. That's the thing that if you can get each of these kids to start thinking about and ideating on, I think that you can see will lead to incredible results for and ideas that they come up with of how to raise money and help these causes.
That's awesome advice.
To put it very succinctly, TEEM gives kids a way to transcend self, and that's what we'd like to do.
It's really true. I mean, as yeah, as silly as that sounds, it is true. And I think that that threshold for transcending self is way lower than we think.
On that for years, decades.
Retweet.
Yeah, no, really, I would write that. I think I'm gonna get that tattooed on my forearm tomorrow, right here. Yeah, I think, you know, Dylan makes a great point. And just as one example, this junior from Alexandria, Virginia, who somehow found out about us, is doing a film project for some kind of college scholarship, and, you know, could have picked anything, and himself was like, you know, if I'm doing this, I might as well do this for a nonprofit. And I don't think anybody else like in his group did that. maybe because they just simply were unprompted and like it happened that, you know, Brandon thought about that, which is cool. But I think we are, you know, especially young people could probably use more prompts in a world where career, for good reason, is, you know, given primacy. It should be. But that Venn diagram between serving others, what it does for self and the people around you, and personal contentment is really aligned. You know, going back to that either or, it's not either or. I think that if someone told like type A, you know, focus on SAT this and early app this, that's the case, I would have been more curious. I would have been like, okay, well, what does that look like? Whereas, you know, I sort of had this idea, and again, this is really, you know, really perhaps only my fault that I didn't know this, but you know, I had this idea of sort of Peace Corps, like, you know, goes halfway around the world and you know, struggle with student loans. So, you know, there's a world where you are a full-time professional and you are still doing this as a part of your lifestyle, right? There's a world where you're a part-time worker, a remote worker, whatever. And even a college student, maybe especially a college student. You know, when so, you know, some people are fortunate to you know, have a lot of their expenses paid for, and the only thing they really got to do is study. Or, you know, loans and all the other stuff sort of help them free up some time anyways for them to study. Well, you know, it might not be a bad idea to spend 3, 4, 5 hours thinking about what you're good at and how you can use that to help others.
That's wonderful. I could listen to you guys all day. I think you have such a way with not just explaining your experiences, but the importance of everything behind it and really resonating with the students. And we're really excited to continue supporting you. And we mean it from the bottom of our hearts. You two are exemplary, and we find that the students really resonate with you. And I think that you are very inspirational for them. And we can only hope that we can help them become similar in the sense like, okay, let's do something positive with this world. So we really appreciate you being here tonight. We appreciate everything that you've done. You know, from meeting in the diner almost 2 years ago to where we are now, you know, we're proud of where you have been and where you are taking your organization, and we really appreciate you taking the time to share this with our educators. So thank you.
Thank you all for coming and listening to us. It never ceases to surprise us that we have an audience. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Thank you
guys.
guys.
Thank you, guys.
Everyone have a
you
wonderful
all.
night. Thank you
Have
so
a good
much.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.